Welcome back to the channel, guys. So today's video is going to be actually on an engine that I've been curious about. This 2003 Chevrolet Avalanche has a Summit Racing 450 horsepower crate 5.3. This is going to be a good, or what we're hoping to be a good replacement long block for a lot of guys that has a higher mileage 24X engine. So let's go ahead and get this thing inside and check it out. All right, let's pop the hood and check it out. So again, this is the Summit Racing 450 horsepower crate engine. I'll go ahead on and post up the cam specs on this thing. It is essentially just a rebuilt 24X Gen 3 5.3. This is a drive-by-wire vehicle, so all the throttle body, intake manifold, all that stuff is factory. It has been upgraded with 50-pound Delphi injectors, and it currently has the factory exhaust manifolds on it with the factory catalytic converters. The exhaust is 2.5-inch pipe, dual 2.25-inch tailpipes. So I will go in and let you guys know I do not expect this thing to make big power. My biggest goals for today's video is going to be watching oil pressure, looking at VE tables, trying to get an idea if this is going to be a good replacement engine for people. But I'm going to anticipate this thing to make like right around that 260 to 265 wheel range. A stock 5.3 on this dyno will normally make right around 210 to 215. We also do have larger wheels and tires. We've got 24s with 33s. So it's not going to be the best dynoing truck. But anyways, let's get on the dyno and see what it does. So let's slide underneath this truck, check it out. So again, the engine is new. It does look dry. Transmission looks dry. Those are the original cats. It's got 304,000 miles on there. So I expect that to drop power drastically. Wide pipes factory. So it's got like a 2.5-inch exhaust on it. Got a Flowmaster 10 series muffler on it. Dual 2.25-inch tailpipes. So that's definitely going to be a restriction. This is a 2-wheel drive truck. That one feels good. That one does not feel good. I don't know if I can get it to pick that up on video. Needs a U-joint, so it's going to get a U-joint before it goes on the dyno. So I'll have the guys put that on, and then we'll get it down the rollers. That is the reason why we check it. That could have been bad. I mean, it doesn't feel completely terrible, like it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fail on the dyno, but last thing we want to do is drop a drive shaft on this thing and take out a exhaust system or fuel tank. So anyways, guys, that just goes to show, always check this stuff before you put it on the dyno. All right, a fresh Spicer U-joint installed. Let's get it down and get it on the rollers.
Video was lost. I went to read the ECM on the bench harness and everything went fine. I built a base file on video to show you all the necessary changes, and the ECM had an error 4 write erase failed. I couldn't get the ECM to accept a tune file whatsoever. This is the first place to look.
All right, I'm gonna try to get to where you guys can see this. So anytime you have issues on this body style, always go to the OBD2 port wiring. This purple wire right here, see this orange wire is tied into it? That is going to keep us from being able to write into the vehicle. So again, if you see aftermarket alarm on there, just know that if it's got remote start especially, it's going to have a wire tied to this purple. So I'm going to pull this wire off and then we should be able to flash it hopefully. Hopefully we didn't just brick this ECU.
Now we try to load the tune back into the ECM using the bench harness.
All right, so here's my setup. We got the bench force harness. ECU's pulled up just enough to get the bench force harness on there. Obviously this truck has a ton of stereo equipment, so there's wires and shit everywhere. That's gonna make it hard to get out. But anyways, I have my 10-foot tuning cable, so I can actually just have the laptop down here. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to right calibration. Let's try it this way. I don't think it's gonna do it. Oh, maybe. All right, bench harness saves the day. So I'll let this thing write and I'll plug the ECU back in. Then we'll get inside the truck and we'll try to flash the tune in via the OBD2 port. Hope for the best.
OBD2 port still didn't work. Writer erase failed again. Back to the bench harness.
All right, ECU finished writing on the bench. So I'm gonna hook the ECU back up and we'll try again. I may have found the culprit. It's my bench harness. See the oil? I don't know if you guys remember, but I talked to you guys a couple of videos ago about these harnesses filling up with oil. So the ECU has oil in it. I didn't notice it when I first flashed this ECU. I didn't see any oil, but there's oil all in it. Usually by the time you see this, it's too late and the vehicle needs a harness. So I'm gonna talk to the guys and see what they want to do. Obviously, I'm gonna go ahead on and bench flash this ECU to where the vehicle is actually mobile. But yep, flash number 2 on the bench went through. So at least right now the vehicle is mobile. Here's the thing. Right now I can't communicate via OBD2. We could try to do a standalone data link connector and make it to where I at least could get data and tune the thing. I don't know the long-term effects of what's going to happen with this truck as far as having electrical issues or something like that. The harness has been discontinued from GM, so they're going to have to get a used harness for this truck. And this truck is a traction control truck with drive-by-wire, because obviously this is more like SUV style. So that's going to be a little bit tougher. They should be able to find one though. But I've only seen this a handful of times, but every time I see it, it just shocks me, that the fact that, you know, the engine harness can hold that much pressure and actually fill everything up with oil. So the file's loaded in, I'll be able to get the truck started. They'll be able to just drive it or whatever they need to do. They're gonna determine what the customer needs to do. All right guys, so it's January 11th right now. And I actually started this video on October 24th of 23. This truck has been an absolute nightmare. So one thing I want you guys to understand is when it comes to tuning, you've probably seen this on my channel before, but you're gonna run into issues. This truck was plagued with wiring issues. This truck had oil in the engine harness. This truck had just, it was bad. So anyways, the guys tried to get a new harness for this truck. Obviously it was not available. This is a 2003, so 21-year-old truck. So basically what we had to do, the truck actually runs and drives fine. The only issues I was having was a communications issue, and it could be related to the oil, or it could be related to, I mean, this truck literally has probably one of the biggest stereos I've seen. It's got more aftermarket accessories than I've ever seen in a vehicle. I mean, we're talking 03 Avalanche with amp steps. It's got a rear view camera that's like 1080p, that's actually like set up in the rear view mirror. I mean, it's got stuff everywhere. So the fix for this truck, I think I had it in the videos. So I had to cut the wire going to the OBD2 port for the security system. That was the original wire that I thought we had the issues with. But ultimately what we had to do is we had to add our own OBD2 port under the hood. Now this is a temporary deal. We'll undo it, but there's a temporary OBD2 port under the hood right now. And the ECU has constant power directly to battery voltage. And that was the only way we could get this thing to actually communicate properly. Well, then I'd go to flash it after a couple times and it would start to have issues again. Then we replaced the PCM, and so far with the battery voltage power going to the ECU, the standalone OBD2 port under the hood and the new ECU, I've been able to flash this thing, take data and everything. So once I'm finished, the guys will reinstall the alarm wire to the OBD2 port. They will remove the standalone OBD2 port under the hood, and they will put battery power back to the ECU like it's supposed to be. And I think they're going to continue to try to source a engine harness for this truck. So that's where it's going to be at. So obviously my job, this shop, I use their dyno, but they do their own fixes. They'll listen to suggestions from me, but that's about as far as that goes. So I'm just here to tune this thing. So I'm just happy that we can finally tune this thing. Again, this is a 2003 Avalanche. It's got the 450 horsepower Summit crate engine in here. The camshaft is entirely too big. So I will pull this up. So this engine, if anybody wants to use it, so far it seems like a really good engine. We haven't done any wide open throttle pulls or anything like that. I've literally just kind of putted around the parking lot. But it's rated at 450 flywheel horsepower. This is a flat top piston. So it's essentially a Gen 3 5.3 with a 4.8 or L33 piston in it. And then it's got this camshaft that is entirely too big. It'd be cool for a hot rod, but it's really not a good truck application. So, a lot of these say it can be a performance upgraded in the 9907 trucks. It definitely needs an aftermarket torque converter. So this vehicle does have an aftermarket torque converter in it, and it definitely needs larger injectors. But anyways, it's rated at 450 horsepower, 420 foot-pounds of torque. You guys can see the camshaft is 222, 232, which is, it's big. Like that's a big camshaft for what should be a close to direct replacement for one of these trucks. So anyways, we're going to find out how much power this thing makes. But as you saw in the video already, this thing does have 304,000 mile factory catalytic converters on here, factory Y pipe, factory manifolds, factory, all that stuff. So it's literally just a 450 horsepower crate engine with a Avalanche cold air intake and an aftermarket exhaust, or custom built exhaust out the back that's got 2 small tailpipes and stuff. But that's it. That's all it's done to this thing. So I don't anticipate on it making a ton of power. We'll see. So anyways, I want to dive into this tune-up so you guys can see what I've had to modify compared to factory to make this thing run. So I'm going to pull up his stock file. And so this is what I found this thing wants for idle. We're at 700 RPM in gear, 750 in park neutral. I will say that it can go down 50 RPM and be okay, but the engine was a whole lot rougher and just didn't feel right. Now again, with this thing having the stereo, it's got like a 400 amp McMahon alternator on here. So obviously this thing's gonna be beating down the block, sending out a red light. We don't want the idle low enough to where we're already suffering on idle torque and then have that external load like that. So that was another reason why I decided to go up another 50 RPM. So when you're tuning, you got to think about how this vehicle is going to be used. Honestly, I could probably go up another 50 to 100 RPM on this thing. So once the customer gets the vehicle back, if he feels like he's got too much headlight dimming or anything like that, we may idle this thing up some more because the torque converter can take it. I'm just trying to find that fine line of fuel efficiency versus drivability versus idle torque. So anyways, that's what this engine's needed. Airflow wise, obviously I use grams per second, but we ended up, so far, I'm at 11.15 grams per second in gear, 10.4 in park neutral. So you guys can see this, and you can use these if you want to screenshot this. You can use these in, quite a bit of drive-by-wire vehicles if it's got like a stage 2 or stage 3 camshaft from BTR or Texas Speed or GPI or any of those. These numbers will definitely get you in the ballpark. Now every one of these is going to be vehicle specific, but this will get you in the ballpark. I zeroed out my adaptive idle airflow. I do that just to make it easier whenever I'm data logging the short-term idle trims. And some vehicles I'll add this back, some vehicles I won't. I haven't decided on what I'm going to do on this application. Throttle cracker, let's see, I don't even remember what I did on this one. Let me switch over to grams per second. Again, I built all this stuff like months ago, so I don't quite remember. It looks like I cut this in half, which, yeah, that seems about right. So I cut throttle cracker in half so far. MAF table, you guys have seen MAF tuning before. You guys will know what to do from there, but you can obviously just leave this thing stock to get it running. VE table, so far this is where my VE table's at. I don't know how close it is I know idle stuff is really close. And the wide open throttle stuff is basically just what I have used from previous applications. But I have tuned camshafts similar to this, but not exactly this. I mean, this camshaft, I guess ATK designed this camshaft specifically for Summit. So far it seems okay, but this is where I'm at on my VE table. Timing, I have not touched ignition timing at all as far as drivability goes. I've only messed with idle spark advance in drive, and I've messed with the adaptive spark control. The injector data, I had to create that for the 50-pound Delphi injectors. Now this vehicle does have a vacuum referenced fuel pressure regulator, so these numbers are flatlined. I have adjusted stoic for E10 pump gas, and just gone through, I've set up my TPS based power enrichment. I have my power enrichment at a good target for this thing to be on 87 octane and to be as heavy as this is. So this vehicle, I mean, there's batteries all over this truck. I mean, I don't know how big the stereo box is in the back, but I will tell you this truck, even on these, so we got 33-inch tall tires on a 24-inch wheel, but these are an LT rated tire, and it squats the shit out of them in the back. Like, this thing's weighted down to the point where it almost feels like you're floating like a Cadillac. When you're cruising around the parking lots and stuff, you don't even feel bumps. You can just tell this thing is heavy. Sound deadened, like the doors feel like they're full of concrete. Like so this thing's gonna need quite a bit of power enrichment fueling. So I may end up turning this up even more. I may end up at like a 1.25. I may keep it kind of a little bit leaner, like around this area down low, and then I may stack even more fuel in up top. Just because, again, 87 octane, I'm assuming that's what's in this thing. I'm gonna treat it like it is. But yeah, so that's where we're at right now. Torque management wise, a lot of people like to go in here and max the stuff out. I don't. I just added what I think it was 40 foot-pounds. Yeah, I added 40 foot-pounds of torque to this max torque right here. I added the same 40 foot-pounds right here. I adjusted this. Now, I've seen guys completely 100% this table. I've told you about this in other videos, but please don't 100% this. If you end up with any type of TAC module error, this thing's going to default to a 1% blade angle over factory idle. So the truck would actually idle at like probably 1,000 to 1,100 RPM, and that's usually enough to get it on and off of trailers or off to a safe spot in gear. But if you leave this at 100, once that TAC module fault happens, I've seen these things rev to where they'll just try to sit on the rev limiter and you can't even drive it. So just leave this like this. So this top row is completely factory. Obviously I've put 100s everywhere else. That's just my personal preference. Abuse mode, I've increased it. I've just gone through the general stuff that I've showed you guys in other videos, but I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what it takes. Like the settings that I've made to idle. So basically it comes down to idle RPM, this adaptive idle base running airflow right here. That's essentially all this thing needs to actually start and run. And then you will obviously go into, you're gonna need aftermarket injectors for this engine. Summit recommends, I believe, at least a 36 pound. Realistically, you could, yeah, this is about 36 pound. I'll tell you that this engine is realistically only gonna need it something bigger than like a 28 pound. So a stock truck injector won't quite get it, but a LS1 injector would get it done. And then obviously a 30 pound injector would get it done, 36 pound get it done, 42 pound LS3 injector would get it done. Just kind of just depends on which intake manifold you go with and what your rail, what fuel rail setup you have. Again, this one's on a 50 pound Delphi, which is we buy them off of LS Acceleration's website. It's a 11 to 13 Escalade flex fuel injector. Pretty common injector, I think like 250 bucks or something. But anyways, that's what it took to get this thing running. So I'm gonna go ahead on and start this thing up. All right, so truck's on the dyno, got the vehicle data logging right now. I did just do a flash just not too long ago, so short-term fuel trims are going to be a little bit off at the moment, but they do end up pulling in close once you get the vehicle running. I have only tuned to idle. I have not touched anything else. So let's go ahead and start driving this thing, and I just want to watch short-term fuel trims. So I am going to be, with this vehicle, I'm using two HPtuners interfaces. I'm using my MPVI-2 that has my Ballinger wideband attached to it, and I'm using my MPVI-3 for flashing, just because my MPVI-3 has all of my credits on there. So I have to get under, basically I have to get under the hood and I have to swap them out. So right now we're just gonna look at short-term fuel trims. I just wanna kind of get an idea of how close I am as far as MAF tuning goes, as far as my V table goes. So as you've seen in my videos before, I'm actually live tuning my V table also. So basically I have a graph set up to where I can calculate VE versus dynamic airflow. So right now I'm actually populating a VE table as we speak. So if you guys want to see how to do that, you just check out my members only video. There'll be a link in the description. But I'm just trying to get an idea as to how close I am on my VE table. So I'm in second gear right now, and I'm just going to keep bringing up RPM. All right, so at that point was the point where we went into open loop. And because I don't have my wideband in here, I'm gonna stop. And we're gonna just kind of glance over my VE table and compare to these numbers right here. At the same time, I'm also feeling how idle is on idle coast down. So far, with the short-term idle trims where I have them, where they're basically on a drive-by-wire vehicle, well, drive-by cable really, anything Gen 3, I'll just go and say that. Anything Gen 3, I actually prefer to have short-term idle trims pulling about 0.5 grams per second, whether you're in park, whether you're in drive, pretty much no matter what the situation is. That's just what I like. It seems to work out to have the best coast down, the quickest startup response, everything else. I still feel like we're missing, I think we're missing some tables in HPtuners on Gen 3 vehicles, even especially more so on the drive-by-wire vehicles. So that's how I get my stuff done. So I'm watching Throttle Cracker and I'm watching Throttle Follower to see how that responds. And so far, I mean, that coast down was actually, I mean, it was basically perfect. Like there was no dip when I got down slow or anything like that. So let's go ahead on and dig into this VE table. So I'm gonna look at like the road 2800. I've got 65% at 40 kPa. So we'll go airflow. I got 72, so I'm still off. So this camshaft is big enough. This VE table, I think on this side was more like a truck Norris camshaft, and the truck Norris camshaft has a lot more mid-range torque than what I'm gonna anticipate this camshaft having. So that makes sense as to why I would be off right here. Let's see, 4400, I'm at 81.1 at 65 kPa. Pretty far off there too. So I'm gonna go ahead on and make these adjustments with what the values that I've inputted in, and we'll keep working on this tune. All right, so made some changes to the VE table. So here's where I'm currently at right now. Reduced it all quite a bit. So now this thing may be happy at wide open throttle, but basically I ended up pulling like 11% off, and I ended up going ahead on making the change like across that entire column. And the reason being is, as we've talked about before, a lot of the times with VE changes, what it wants at low load is also what it wants at high load. Now this application may be wrong, because again, this truck has 304,000 miles on the original cats, and that actually does change a lot of things. So we'll see, but that's where I'm at right now on the VE table. Everything looks pretty decent. I'm a little bit off on short-term fuel trims at idle on the MAF, but again, I'm not terribly concerned about it right now. My only concern is getting this thing dialed in at high loads on the dyno, and then I'm going to take it out on the street. So let's go ahead and get this thing in the second gear. You guys can see wideband is active now. Now this is a bone stock timing table, so it should be plenty safe for me to do a wide open throttle pull on it. Temperature on the truck looks good, everything looks good. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a partial pull to like probably 5,000 or so, as long as it doesn't go too lean. All right, that's a lot of timing. So again, we're on factory ignition timing, and it was on the high octane table, and it was not picking up any knock, which is kind of weird because I almost feel like I even heard it. So obviously we were leaner than what we should have been, but I mean, nothing crazy. So anyways, I'm gonna take this EQ air versus MAF. As you guys can see how clean the transition is, but we're like 5% off right here, and we're like 6% off right here. So I'm gonna make that change to the MAF, and we'll come back and do it again. All right, so I'm currently loading the new tune file in here. Ignition timing is still factory. Now, some guys may wonder why, because honestly, if you want to develop a tune-up for a new engine platform, you can just start with the factory stuff. This thing, obviously, it was overtimed, but that's also because my fueling was off, so cylinder air mass was off. So if you look right here, we're only at 0.61 grams per cylinder air mass. This thing should be higher than that. Now, if it ends up not higher than that, then it may just be too much of an exhaust restriction, or it could be a failed mass airflow sensor. So another thing that I've talked about with you guys, I've had a bad string of Gen 4 or Gen 3 vehicles with bad mass airflow sensors. And one way that I look, this engine should make, this thing should probably end up making at least 9,800 to 10,000 hertz. It should do well over 10,000 hertz. It should be more like 10,500 hertz. So as we're seeing it increase, if it starts to just level out to where it doesn't do anything more than like 9,000 hertz, it's possible that we could end up with a bad math, but we'll see. That's what data logging's for. So I'm just adding this fuel in here, and then once the fuel is in, then we'll go back through and I'll watch timing. If timing's still too high, then I will develop a new timing table for this engine. So realistically, this engine's probably gonna want, if we were to utilize the factory table and keeping all the IAT modifiers and everything all the same, this engine's probably gonna want maybe 2 or 3 degrees less timing with the flat tops in here. Actually, what I could do, I may do that. I think I'm gonna actually pull up an L33, which is a 5.3 HO engine, and we'll use the factory timing tables from that thing, because that's a flat top 5.3 10-to-1 compression as well. So let's start there. So I'm gonna dig through my laptop, see if I can find the L33 timing file, and then we'll load that in. All right, tune file is loaded in. Again, this is, we've changed the mass airflow sensor. As far as EQ air goes, I've adjusted the VE table, and I have now installed just a stock L33 ignition timing table. Now again, guys, I hope you guys do understand that this is not the way I would normally tune, that this is just me helping you guys. I have a lot of tuning shops that watch my videos, so obviously you guys will know everything that I'm showing. This is more for the guys that are just learning how to do this, or for the guys that want to use this engine and want to just make some general changes until you can get to a tuning shop, or if you just want to learn for yourself. But anyways, using that L33 timing table should be a lot better on this thing. Still in vehicle simulation mode though, so let's go ahead on and lay into it again. So you'll see we're not at 28 degrees anymore, we're at 21, 22, so not bad. Fueling wise, everything looks okay. All right, I'm gonna let off. You guys can see this is commanded, this is actual. So we're pretty close to spot on. Didn't show any knock. So far, data-wise, everything's looking okay. MAF frequency is still not where I would expect it to be, so that's usually a sign of it's so restricted that it's not moving the airflow that it wants to move. So we could have a stopped up air filter. I haven't looked at it. Could just be this exhaust. It could be these 304,000 mile catalytic converters. You guys have seen, I've done the high mileage. Like I had that like almost like a John Deere green colored, like maybe a 2000 truck with a truck Norris in it. Had a very similar configuration. And I think it only ended up making like 260 horsepower on here because of all the restrictions. So anyways, I'm going to, let's check knock sensor sensitivity, compare it to the L80 or L33 as well. And I'll compare where my V table is showing right here to where we're at. I'll tell you right now, with the way the catalytic converter set up or whatever it is choking this thing up, it would have probably been okay with factory injectors. I'm not ever recommending that, but it would have run them to 100%, but it'd have probably been pretty close to okay. But I mean, as of right now, this truck looks like it's not going to be making shit for power. So I'm seeing like 275 horsepower on my little calculator that I use, which is almost spot on with this dyno on the Gen 3 stuff. This engine also would normally want a whole lot more RPM. I don't know that it's necessarily going to want it. Let me see where we're at on rev limiter. Rev limiter is at 6,600. I think that's going to be high for this truck. 6,600 there. It's just going to do a power pull. As simple as that. This thing's not going to make shit for power, but we're just going to stick with, so far the L33 timing table actually looks pretty solid as to what this thing's going to want. Fueling looks almost perfect. I mean, some spots were like 1%, almost 1.5% off, but then other areas were like almost exactly spot on. This little anomaly right here, I just ignore that because it only hit it for just a split second, so it wasn't enough data for it to actually be valid just yet. All right, let's do a power pull. All right, dyno is set up. We're gonna do 3,000 to 6,000. That should work us out to about 93 or 94 miles an hour on the data log. So that should be fine. These super high mileage trucks like this, like, I hate running them ragged on the dyno, but I have not changed anything from that last vehicle simulation pull. So again, this truck is not a race truck clearly. So I'm tuning it in the manner of how GM would have tuned it from the factory. So I'm trying to be as efficient as I can. So you don't have to go through here making a shitload of changes or throw a shitload of timing at it. Like, this thing is it's gonna be a good running truck. And let's do a pull. Now I'm gonna watch for puffs out the back. Oh, something was not happy. All right, well, that was eventful. So I will get out and show you guys what looks like it happened when all the sparks came out. So you'll see I got to a peak RPM of 59.77. I was just about to lift off. But best I can tell is this alternator is pulleyed so small that I think either the alternator just come apart or the fan got into the housing, something crazy. It ended up catching a pallet on fire in front of the truck. That pallet's probably, I don't know, it's probably 15 feet away. And it had a, I guess what looks like a new pickup tube, like a new oil pickup tube for like an LT. And that was wrapped up in a plastic bag. Caught that on fire, so I had to put that out with some fire aid. So anyways, let's get out. I'll show you the power this thing made. Did pretty much made exactly what I would have thought. And probably gonna wrap this video up. All right, so we made 260.7 horsepower, 279 foot-pounds of torque. You guys can look right here and just see how bad it's laying over. That's all gonna be all in that exhaust. So I will show you that pallet right there. See the red? We're just right beside it. That's what caught on fire. All right, anyways, as y'all can see, so fueling is good. Timing looks good. Everything looks good on my end. So I'm gonna let the guys make the decision as to what they want the shift points to be at. They're gonna call the customer, and I'm sure he can call Mechman, figure out the pulley ratio that this thing needs. So if they want the same pulley ratio, maybe we shift the thing, like max power on the dyno it made was 5,200 because of the exhaust, so maybe we have it shift at 5,400 and it will be okay. But I'll do the drivability stuff on the street. It's already pretty close as it is, but I'll finish knocking this thing out later. So I just wanted to kind of show you guys, first off, a final payoff on this Avalanche video that I've been trying to do since October. But yeah, overall, I'm happy with this engine. Obviously, I think it's going to make really good power. You know, if it gets long tubes and a good exhaust and a good cold air and no fan clutch on here, I think it'll make good power. I think it'll probably be in the normal, 300 to 310 wheel that we normally see on this dyno, which is like, 330 to 350 wheel on a Dynojet. I think this engine is completely capable of that. I would definitely recommend this engine for any of you guys that are looking for just a quick hot rod project. You know, some of you guys are buying these $300 or $400 junkyard engines and then send them over to the machine shop and you end up with $3,000 in them anyways. And these machine shops just aren't that good at reassembling these engines. So to me, that $3,700, yeah, $3,799 seems like a pretty good buy on this engine. So I'm happy with it. But anyways, I will see you guys in the next video.